Hi guys, Assalamu alaikum. We're going to be discussing, we're back, and I think in the previous stream we discussed about the basic economic problem, opportunity cost, and we're continuing with our O-level streams. Please share this live stream with all the O-level IGCSE economic students who are going to be appearing in the May-June 26. We're going to be continuing our course. So in this lesson, we are discussing the concept of factors of production, specifically factor rewards, and then we're going to be moving on to the production possibility curve. So share this live stream with your friends and peers in your classes who are appearing for IGCSE May June 2026, guys. And also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe so that you can get access to more content. So we're going to be going through factors of production now. We know what factors of production are, right? Factors of production are basically your resources that are used to produce other goods and services. So they are basically primarily they are the building blocks of any economy because they're used to produce goods and services, so they're primarily responsible for your GDP. And as already previously mentioned in the video as well, I think in the previous video we also covered that there are four factors of production: land, labor, capital, enterprise. While land includes all your natural resources, human labor is your human effort, and capital is your man-made resources. Right? And enterprise is the risk-taking and organization. It's your risk-taking entrepreneur is your the person who organizes all the factors of production, and the enterprise is the business itself, right? So so basically a couple of things, a couple of examples, because they come in the MCQ, so it's important that you guys go through this. So land is basically all the natural resources that are used to produce goods and services. That is land. What does it include? It includes the minerals, forest, anything that is naturally that exists, that man hasn't really produced it. Sunlight, oil, natural raw materials, you know all of this is basically land. Okay. And the factor income responsible for land is basically your rent. So owners of the land, they receive the rent. So, and the reason why we say that owners receive rent is because the owner of the land, specifically let's say the farmers and the people who give out their land for others to use it in exchange for a payment, right? So since land itself is naturally given, so people are willing to pay to use it, right? So this payment that they will give to use it is basically the rent. So so the farmer would pay the rent to use the farmland for wheat production. Similarly, you can say that a company would pay the rent to extract minerals or oil. So a company would pay the rent to extract those minerals or oil. Simple, right? So that is why the factor reward for land is basically rent. Then you have labor. Labor is basically the human effort or the physical human effort that we basically put in. So it's basically the work that is done by people, right? Like teachers, doctors, factory workers, engineers. And the quality of the land, make sure that you know this, that the quality of the labor would depend upon how trained the labor is, on the skills of the labor, the training of the labor, and the motivation of the labor. And all of these things, skills, labor, and motivation, are responsible for higher productivity and efficiency of the workers. And the more productive and efficient the workers are, the more they would be employable and the more they would be paid. So okay. And workers receive wages or salaries. So wages or salaries is basically the factor reward for labor, because they're putting in their effort, physical and mental effort, and they're giving in their time. The workers are giving in their time and effort, and they're giving in their skills to production. And in return, they must be compensated for, because there's an opportunity cost of giving up leisure or other jobs. I could have done something else as well, but I'm working for you, so I need to be paid. So there's an opportunity cost of giving up leisure or not doing the other job. So that is why they are productively contributing to output, hence they expect wages in return, right? So that is the reasoning. Capital, man-made resources used to produce other goods and services. That includes, tools, machines, factories, vehicles, computers, buildings. These are all the examples that you can use to for your capital. And there was this MCQ that came that buildings, remember, don't come under land since they are man-made. So buildings will not be part of land. Building is a man-made good, so it's part of capital, because the factory premises is man-made, and it's without the factory. If factory premises wasn't there, you won't be able to conduct economic activity or your production. So definitely the factory building itself is capital and not land, because it's man-made and it's used to produce other goods that the economic activity is responsible for doing, right? And owners of capital basically earn interest, right? So the reward for capital is interest, right? The reward for capital is interest. So moving forward, enterprise, basically the reward for enterprise is profit, right? So I'm cutting out in profit from here. Owners earn, the factor reward, I should have written factor reward is interest, right? And ideally, the more capital you have, economic theory suggests that the more capital you have, the more efficient and the more productive your production would be, not in terms of quality as well. And plus, the more capital you have, the lower would be your everyday running cost, because of it improves the efficiency of your production capital, right? Enterprise is basically the ability to bring together land, labor, capital to produce goods and services. So enterprise or entrepreneurship is basically the fact that the fact that you can gather all the other resources like land, labor, capital and do a business. And entrepreneurs are taking that risk to organize production and make business decisions. So their aim is to actually make a profit. But the thing is that you can also end up with a loss. So the reward for factor of production is profit for taking the risk and for managing the business. That is why we say that the factor reward is profit, because you're taking the risk and you're managing the business. Now, there's an example that I've given as well, that what land is. Land includes your field, water, natural resources, all of that. Labor, the work done by people, the farmer who grows the wheat, the miller who grinds the flour, the baker who mixes, the delivery guy. All of this is basically labor. Capital, man-made equipment and tools, for example, trucks for delivery, ovens, baking trays, mixers, machines, tractors and harvesters for farming. All of this is capital, while enterprise is basically the person or the people who are organizing everything. So the bakery owner or the company who decides what type of bread to make, who buys the wheat, who hires all these people, who buy ovens, that is all enterprise, right? And they take the risk with the hope or the intention of making a profit if people do buy it, right? So this organizing and risk taking is basically known as enterprise. The fact that it's the risk taking ability that we're talking about here. Moving forward, guys, this is something which is very, very important, is about the mobility of the factors of production. This is in your syllabus, mobility. Now, when we talk about mobility, we're talking about, so for example, mobility means that how easily could factors of production be moved from one place to the other or from one use to the other. So I want you to hear this out again, that when you talk about the mobility of the factors of production, we are actually referring to how easily could your factors of production be moved from either one place to another, or how easily and how quickly could they be put to some other use. So mobility means how easily a factor of production can be moved, and when we say they could be moved, we are talking about a geographical location or in terms of another job or in terms of another productive use. So you have two types of mobility in the syllabus. Geographical mobility is a mobility from one place to another. How easily could you move? Occupational mobility is from one use or one job to another, right? So for instance, and we'll have to study about each of them, so land, labor, capital, all of them. So if we talk about land, right? Land is, like I said, it's your natural resources. So land, essentially, in terms of geographical mobility, it is immobile because you can't really move out land itself. Geographically, it is fixed. But some of the land, let's say oil, timber, this could be extracted, so they are physically transferable. Some parts of land are transferable, but the site itself remains immovable, so that is ideally geographically immovable in those sense. So it is immobile in that sense. But however, as far as the occupational mobility is concerned, although land is some of the land is occupationally mobile, but in mostly it is immobile, right? Because mobility or in occupational mobility is also low to moderate, because the reason is that in agricultural land, for instance, let's say some of the agricultural land could be redeveloped for housing or industry, or some of the agricultural land you can use it to redevelop for housing or industry. So in that sense, it is, you can say that so basically occupational mobility is referring to, this is your land. So if you're using it to produce or grow crops, then you can just eliminate all the crops and instead grow a housing society or industry on it. So from one productive use to another productive use is what is occupational mobility, right? But so yes, you can do that, but again, not all natural resources are could be transformed or put to other uses, productive uses, without significant cost. For example, oil fields can't be used for a housing industry, right? So not all natural resources are so like I said, so many of the natural resources are very highly specific, such as mineral deposits and oil fields, and they cannot be transformed into other productive uses without incurring significant costs. So again, land may, as far as occupational mobility is concerned, low to moderate. Geographical mobility is concerned, majorly immobile hota hai. And however, key influences, what are the key influences? For instance, if you have certain legal restrictions, environmental regulations, so you can't really put land to different uses. If you have environmental laws and regulations in place, you can't extract oil to a certain beyond a certain extent because of environmental concerns, let's say. And sometimes land has certain natural characteristics that cannot be put to other uses, right? And also, if you want to convert land to, for instance, if you want to convert, like I said, these, you have these oil fields, you can't really transform them into other productive uses without incurring a significant cost. So again, the cost and feasibility of converting land for other purposes is also highly essential, because it is important for us to see that, and that has an impact on land mobility. If the cost and feasibility, if it's not feasible to convert land to another use, then it will not be put to another use. So it's immobile in that sense. If it's very costly to convert a farmland, agricultural land, to, let's say, a housing industry, it's immobile in that context, right? Similarly, labor, as far as occupational mobility is concerned, again, it varies widely. Unskilled labor has a very high occupational mobility. Why? Because unskilled labor works in jobs where you don't really require a lot of education or something. So while on the other hand, so anyone could become, let's say, a cab driver or maybe a chef or something. So unskilled labor tends to have high levels of occupational mobility, because it's easy for a banker to become a chef, or a banker to become a car driver, but it's not easy for a car driver to become a banker, right? So unskilled labor tends to have high occupational mobility, while skilled and professional workers, it's difficult for them to switch occupations because they need a lot of specialized training and experience. Well, as far as your geographical mobility is concerned, for labor is mostly mobile, but there could be restrictions based on social, economic, and institutional factors as well. For example, if I am offered a job in some other country, probably I might not go, and that is when I am geographically immobile. Maybe because I don't really know the language there, I don't understand the culture there, or something like that, or immigration restrictions. So all of these factors influence mobility. Like, influences are the education and the training systems that enable retraining. For instance, let's say If I am working as a banker and I am now thinking of becoming an engineer, then I will require a lot of retraining, education, and all of that to become an engineer. So probably in that context, I am immobile, right? Availability of information, it also depends upon whether I know that whether other jobs are available in that country or not. So the more information that is available, not only available but accessible as well, then higher would be the geographical mobility, and vice versa. Again, economic incentives given to workers and wage differentials also have an impact on geographical mobility. um, Social and again, if economic incentives, like, maybe that other country has a very high tax rate, so there's no point in going there. So if, let's say, in our country taxes are very low, or wages are not that different between, you know in between countries, then probably mobility might be low. Social and cultural factors, again, this is pretty self-explanatory. Family commitments and local ties, I might not go to some other country to work because of social and cultural reasons. Again, capital is, like I said, it refers to man-made resources like machinery and equipment. Occupational mobility is generally limited for capital, because many of the capital cannot be easily used for some other purposes, for redeployed to other purposes, like a printing press cannot be used to produce cars. So generally occupational mobility is low, but geographical mobility is moderately high, because it could be physically relocated. Got it. um apart from that as far as enterprise is concerned, occupational mobility is very high, because entrepreneurs can apply their skills and vision and the ability into various industries and ventures. Not only is occupational mobility high, but occupational mobility, geographical mobility is high, because businesses could be relocated. You could work online as well. Right. So it's not difficult to start a business at a new location, or probably work online or something like that. So it also depends upon entrepreneurial skills and experience across different industries. It depends upon whether overall market output. So for instance, like, if, let's say, the overall regulatory framework of Pakistan is really poor, there are a lot of excessive regulations, then enterprise mobility occupationally and geographically would be very low. A lot of so for instance, if more multinationals are coming into Pakistan because we have given them a very tax-friendly environment, so that would represent a high enterprise mobility. So again, they're talking about, that is why it's written about market opportunities, legal or regulatory environment, right? Apart from that, the quality and the quantity of the factors of production, we're talking about what influences the quality and the quantity of the factors of production. So the quantity of the factors of production are influenced by different factors, like if you discover new resources, like finding oil reserves, minerals, and that would increase the quantity of land, right? Climate change can actually reduce the size of the land available. Other than that, quality of the land could be influenced by building a good irrigation and drainage systems, using fertilizers and technology, right? So this is pretty easy stuff. As far as labor is concerned, the quantity of the labor could improve because of population growth. Again, this is actually, you're going to be studying this in macroeconomics as well, that the size of the labor force could go up due to falling birth rates. So size of the labor force could go up because of higher birth rates and lower death rates, and population growth, and even for as far as migration policies are concerned, right? So that is what affects the quantity of the labor force. As far as retirement age is concerned, so if you increase the retirement age and people retire later in your country, let's say the retirement age is 60, but in your country they retire at 70, so automatically the size of the labor force will go up, right? And migration policies, other people coming into your country and working in your country, that would increase the supply, and qualities of labor would definitely go up because of more education, training, because of good healthcare, working conditions are improving, which is obviously motivating workers to raise productivity. Quality of the labor force basically deals with productivity and the efficiency of the labor force. capital, the quantity of the capital would increase when you're making more investment in capital, and the quality of the capital goes up because of better quality maintenance, R&D, technological progression. That's what you need to know as far as capital is concerned, right? Enterprise is basically again, technological progress, more efficient equipment, research and development. If you're doing more R&D, innovations to improve capital good maintenance, keeping machines in good condition, obviously it would improve the capital. And as far as enterprise is concerned, enterprise, the quality and the quantity of the factors of production. Again, the more you encourage the more you encourage a business environment in your economy, the better would be the organizational. The more businesses, so the quantity of the enterprise would depend upon more businesses being opened up, and the cultural attitudes. Let's say, nowadays, doing business is also, or having your own startup or something, is again something more considered a lot fashionable or something. So the cultural attitudes, or how you really value business in your economy, is also going to influence the quantity of the businesses. And the quality would definitely depend upon access to networks and mentors, experience. The more experience you are, and the more business education you have. Got it, guys? So this is basically a whole document on factors of production. So we are done with this, and now we're going to be discussing about the next topic of our lesson, of our YouTube stream, and that is production possibility curve, which is again a very important topic as far as IGCSE is concerned. It usually comes in past papers. Now, you need to understand that production, you know what the word production means, you know what the word possibility means, you know what the word curve means. So you can also call it production possibility diagram. So you need to understand that economists have the tendency to represent things on a model through a diagram, right? And that's simply, you can say that the production possibility curve is a diagram or a model that shows different economic concepts. So there are 3 different concepts that are shown through, in fact, I should write 4 here because economic growth as well. There are 4 different concepts that are shown through PPC, that is scarcity, choice, opportunity, cost, and growth. But what exactly is a production possibility curve? So production possibility curve, guys, is going to tell us the maximum, like what's the maximum possible output combinations of 2 goods or services an economy can produce when all resources are fully and efficiently employed given the current technology. Or you could say that it shows the different possible, you can also use this word, that it shows the different possible output combinations, or different possible combinations could be used. This makes the definition more easier. An economy can produce when all resources are fully efficiently employed given the current technology. So how do we really draw a production possibility curve? We draw a production possibility curve by extending 2 axes. And let's say you have good X on the X-axis, good Y on the vertical axis. And let's say that this is basically 100. So, and this is, let's say, maybe 90. So let's say that if I ask you that if you use all your factors of production, all your resources, all your technology, all your land, labor, capital, the maximum amount of good Y that you will end up making is 100 units. And if you are making 100 units of good Y, you will end up making 0 units of good X. Which means that if all the resources are used to produce good Y, only 100 units of Y will be produced. That is it. If all the resources are used to produce good Y, only 100 units of good Y will be produced with 0 units of good X. And instead, if all the resources are used to produce good X, then 90 units of good X will be produced and 0 good Y. So these 2 extreme points on the vertical and the horizontal axis of the PPC, these are representing your maximum potential. So if all resources are used, and if all resources are not used, let's say some resources are allocated to X while some are allocated to Y. If some are allocated to X and some are allocated to Y, then those combinations would be represented somewhere in between, right? So let's say this could be a combination where I am making, let's say, 40 units of X while I am making 75 units of Y. So again, this is a combination where I'm making 40 units of X and 75 units of Y. But again, the point is that if I'm making 40 units of X and 75 units of Y, I am utilizing all my resources. It's not that I'm not utilizing all my resources, I'm utilizing all my resources, right? Now, if I join the dots, what I get is a simple, nice production possibility curve. So the production possibility curve is simply showing us the different possible combinations of two goods and services an economy could produce when all resources are fully and efficiently employed. So this is an easier definition that you can use, that it shows the different possible combinations of two goods and services an economy can produce when all its resources are efficiently and fully employed given the current technology. So what we're assuming is that along the production possibility curve, we are employing all our resources. It means that all the factors of production are efficiently and effectively employed, and there are no idle resources. And what do you mean by that all factors of production are employed? It simply means that all the factors of production are utilized to the maximum extent, and there is no unemployment or idle resources available. So let's say this is point A, and if let's say I want to produce more of good X, right? If I want to make more of good X, then the thing is that I will have to, since I said that at point A, all factors of production and resources are used. So if all resources are used and you're producing 40 units of X and 75 units of Y by using all resources, then it means that in order to produce more of good X, you need to sacrifice or compromise on some of your good Y. So what happens is that as you produce more of good X, let's say you're producing 50X now, which means that you increase the production of good X by 10 units, then let's say you ended up foregoing 15 units of good Y. So in order to produce 10 more X, you forgo 15 Y. In order to produce 10 more X, you forgo 15 Y. So in order to produce 10 more X, you're foregoing 15 Y. So the opportunity cost of producing 10X is 15 Y. So the point is that as you go down the curve, you're facing an opportunity cost. So the production possibility curve, as you can see, is basically depicting the concept of opportunity cost here, and it is also depicting the concept of scarcity. The reason it is depicting the concept of scarcity is that it's telling us that we can't really produce 50 units of good X. See, the point is that if someone asks me that why can't we produce 50 units of X with 75 Y, why is it not possible to produce 50X with 75 Y? And the answer would be that in order to produce 50X with 75 Y, if I do that, first of all, I can't do that. And this is actually being modeled by the production possibility curve because this point lies outside my PPC. So if any point lies outside my production possibility curve, it is not possible. It is unachievable. It is not possible. It is unachievable. And that is why the production possibility curve also is showing scarcity. It is showing scarcity because I can't be at C. I can't produce 50X with 75Y. So the only option I have is that I need to now reduce the quantity of my Y to produce more X. So if I want to make 50X, then I have to forgo 15Y here. So the production possibility curve is going to show us the concept of scarcity and choice, that we make a choice, we make a trade-off here. Remember the first chapter we talked about trade-off. So we make a trade-off here, that the trade-off is that we decided to forgo 15Y because we had to make 10 more X. So the production possibility curve teaches us the concept of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. And remember that the reason why we are making this trade-off is that resources are scarce, right? Resources are scarce, and like I said, it's not possible for us to make 50X with 75Y, right? That combination is not possible. So resources are scarce. So if that resources are scarce and we can't produce the combinations that we want, so the only way to sort of increase or produce more of X is by foregoing y, and when we forego y, we incur an opportunity cost because we reduce the quantity that is being produced for y. So we could have earned a lot of more revenue. I mean, we won't be able to earn revenue by selling 15 more units of y anymore, right? So this is basically the concept of PPC, that PPC is showing various economic concepts. PPC is showing us the concept of opportunity cost. PPC is showing us the concept of scarcity. PPC is also showing us the concept of choice. So guys, what is the definition of production possibility curve? It's a graphical model that is showing different possible combinations of two goods or services an economy can make when all resources are fully and efficiently employed given the current technology. Given the current technology means that whatever existing technology and whatever existing factors of production we have, based on that, what different combinations can we make? Similarly, if you look at this diagram, there are different points A, B, and C. So A, B, and C is telling us that as you go down the curve, we produce from X1, we make X2 units, from X2 units, we make X3 units, right? And as we are going down the curve, we are foregoing less of Y. I mean, we're foregoing Y basically. So let's say we were initially making Y1 units, but now we are making Y2 units, and Y2 units is less than Y1. Similarly, when we produce more of X, we end up making less of Y further. So as you're going down the curve and you're increasing the production of good X, you have to forego the production of good Y, and that is exactly what the PPC is telling us, because there is an opportunity cost involved of making X. And the reason why there's an opportunity cost is that we can't end up producing the resources, we can't end up producing the goods we can't end up producing the goods in the combination that we want. We can't produce the goods for X in the combination that we really want it to produce because of scarcity, right? However, do remember that even if you're on the PPC, points A, B, and C are representing efficient utilization of resources. Points A, B, and C are representing efficient utilization of resources. And the reason why A, B, and C are representing efficient utilization of resources is because your resources are fully used. It's not that your resources are idle. It's not that. Right, so all of your resources are being fully used. At A also, you're producing a combination of X1 and let's say Y1. So although you're making less of X and more of Y, right? At A, you're making less of X and more of Y. At B, you're making more of X and less of Y. And at C, you're making more of X and further less of Y. So as you're going down the curve, the X is going up, but the Y is going down. I mean, you're making less of Y. So there's an opportunity cost. But even whether you're making more of X or less of Y, or more of Y or less of X, irrespective, any point on the production possibility curve, that is any point on this line, you have this particular line, right? Sorry, this is your PPC. This PPC curve is representing different sets of combination, and these are different combinations of X and Y, right? These are different combinations. So this is one combination, another combination, another. So if you join these thousands of combinations that come in between, you'll get a smooth curve. So whether you are at A, B, or C, what I'm saying is that even if you're making a combination of C or whether you're making a combination of A, any point on the PPC is efficient. And the reason why we say it's efficient is because no resources are being idle. There is full employment of resources. Why are they efficient? They are efficient because there is full employment and all resources are being utilized. So there is full employment of resources. And the reason why points A, B, and C are efficient is because there is full employment of resources. None of the resources are idle. None of the resources are being wasted. There is no slack in the economy. None of the resources are being used. None of the resources are basically idle in the economy. So that is why we say that the production possibility curve. So just like you say, there's like 10 teachers in a school, and 6 teachers are sitting in the staff room and have nothing to do. So that is underutilization of resources because you're paying them. But if all 10 teachers are occupied the whole day in school, then that's, let's say, a good use of resource, right? So all resources, we say that they're fully employed. So full employment of resources means that all the resources are being fully utilized to the maximum possible extent they can. This is the definition for you, for your level, IGCSE level and O level, that this is what you need to understand at the IGCSE level, that full employment of resources means that all resources are being fully used to the maximum possible extent that they can. However, you can see that there are two more points. One is point D and one point E is not shown here, but this is point E that is outside the curve. Point E outside the curve could be this point as well. Anywhere outside the curve could be point E. But there is this point D that is basically inside the curve, and we say that inside the curve is basically underutilization of resource. And the reason is that, let's say at point D we are making 10 units of good Y and we are making 10 units of good X. At point D, let's say we are making 10 units of good Y and making 10 units of good X. Now, if I tell you to make more units of good X, then if you sort of extend this line to the curve, then let's say you're making 20 units of good X. So had you been, see, I said that when you are on the curve, you're efficient. But let's say you're now not on the curve. In fact, you're inside the curve. So you're inside the curve at point D. And at point D, let's assume that you're making 10 units of X and 10 units of Y. So if you're making, let's say, 10 units of X and you're making 10 units of Y, then if I extend this line all the way up till the PPC, then if you were on the curve, then you would have been making 20 units of X with 10 units of Y. If you were on the curve, you would have been making 20 units of X and 10 units of Y. So the point is that with 10y, if you can make 20x by being on the curve, then why the hell are you even inside the curve and you're only making 10x with 10y? If you have the potential or the capacity to make 20x, see, you have the capacity to make 20x with 10y by being on the curve, then you're stupid enough if you're inside the curve and you're making the same 10y with only 10x. So you are underutilizing your resources. It means that you have idle capacity. Your resources are being underutilized. They are not utilized to the maximum possible extent, because with the same 10y you could have made 20x, but now with the same 10y you're making 10x, which means that your resources are being idle. Your resources are not being used to the maximum capacity. That is why we say that any point on the PPC, and this could be in the other direction as well. Let's say you were making 10 units of X and 10 units of Y, and you decide that, you know what, if let's say I take a point all the way up till the PPC at this point, then with 10X and 10Y, I mean, this could be somewhere around maybe 90Y. So with 10X, I am currently making 10Y, and I could make the same 10Y with 90X. So I am with 10x I'm making 10y, and with the same 10x I could end up making 90y. So which means that I'm still underutilizing my resources at point D. Why am I not utilizing? And there could be various reasons why resources are not being utilized. We'll come to that later. But any point on the production possibility curve any point that is inside the production possibility curve is representing an underutilization of resources. Got it? This is something that you need to know. Also, any point that is outside the PPC, let's say this point E, any point outside the PPC is not achievable. Why? Because let me show you. Let's take this point C. At point C, you're making X3 units and you're making, let's say, Y3 units. Now, this is your possible combination. See, what I said in the definition was it shows different PPC. This PPC boundary, this is the boundary wall. This is showing the maximum possible combination. So the point is that any point on the PPC is possible. Any point outside the PPC is desirable, but it is impossible. You really want this combination E, because it will help you. With the same X, you can make more Y now. With the same X, you can have more Y, because at point T, you're producing and consuming X3 of good X, but you're making more of Y. Let's say, maybe this is Y1 units of Y, right? Let's say, for instance, I don't know, let's make it YZ. So with X3 units of good X, you are producing Y2 units of good Y. So the point, YZ units of good Y. Point is that you can't do that, because this point lies beyond your PPC boundary, and a point that lies beyond the PPC boundary means that that point is not possible. It's not possible because it requires resource. It's only possible in one case, when the whole production possibility curve shifts outwards. Then it is possible, because then point Z lies inside, then point Z lies on the new PPC. The point is that the reason why it's impossible is because you don't really have the resources to produce this combination, because this combination requires x3 units of x with yz units of y. So you can't, with x3 units of x, you can only make this much y, because this is the possible combination with with x3 units of x, with x3 units of x at point C, you can only make y3 units of y. You can't make yz units of y with x3 because it's beyond the PPC. So with whatever resources you have, whatever machinery, capital, equipment you have, whatever land you have, whatever resources, scarce resources you have, if you fully utilize them and you say that no more, you know what, I'll make x3 units of x, then with x3 you can maximum make y3. You can't exceed the production of y3 with x3. If you want to make more of y3, let's say, if you want to make if you want to make yz, you insist on making yz, then at yz you'll need to see that what combination is possible, because the PPC shows the possible combination of good x. So at yz you'll need to check out that what is a possible combination of good x, and the possible combination of good x could be, I don't know, maybe xa, not x3 at least. So x3 is lying outside the PPC. So that is basically the concept of the fact that any point that is outside the production possibility curve is not possible. Although it is desirable, you can write this down, it is desirable, but it is unattainable or impossible to achieve that, because you don't really have the resources. And there's only one way to achieve a point that is outside the production possibility curve. That is, if the production possibility curve shifts outwards and the PPC shifts outwards due to a rise in the quality and the quantity of factors of production, right? Also, okay guys, so this is, I hope you understood this. So is it understood by everyone, whoever is watching? Now I'm gonna keeping the class till here. Do remember one more thing that I've written, that movement from a point inside the D to a point on the curve represents better use of existing resources, indicates better use of existing resources, and economic growth, not economic growth. This is and economic growth. So movement from a point that is inside the curve, that is point D, to a point on the curve indicates better use of existing resources and economic growth, right? So for instance, if you are inside the curve at point D, because the reason is that at point D, let's say you're making 10 units of x and 10 units of y, and if you move to on the curve, you end up making what? You end up making, let's say, in 20 units of x. So you're making 20 units of x with the same units of y. So if you were inside the PPC, you were inefficient, but you have the potential to make more of x with the same y. So that is why we are saying that any movement from inside the curve to a point on the curve indicates better utilization of existing resources. So any point, you could move anywhere on the curve, even let's say from a movement from point D to B. At D, you're making, let's say, 10 of x and 10 of y, but at B, you're making x2 could be maybe 15 of x and maybe, let's say, 14 of y. So we are saying that any movement, because this movement is somewhere like this, right? Its movement is somewhat happening like this. So a movement from inside the curve, so remember that a movement from inside the curve to on the curve or near the curve or closer to the curve. So either if you're, let's say, if this is you and you're inside the curve, so either this is the point that is D, so you reach closer to the curve or you reach on the curve, and so it represents inside the curve to on the curve or closer to the curve represents what? It represents utilization. It represents utilization of existing resources. It represents utilization of existing resources. It represents the fact that you're utilizing your existing resources, and in a better way, or just using them, simply using them. You weren't really using them. You had those factories and, you know, businesses, and you had those workers who were not really utilized by businesses. Maybe there was a recession in the economy, or demand was too low, so the workers weren't really utilized. And maybe now your economy is going through a period of growth and stuff, so you're hiring more workers and you're using more of land and capital, so you're making more goods and services in the economy. So this is basically economic growth as well, right? This is basically economic growth. You're utilizing your existing resources, you're utilizing your existing resources, and you're utilizing, so basically you're utilizing your idle capacity. And this is a good thing. You're utilizing your idle capacity. So unemployed workers would now be given more jobs, so they're being utilized, right? So this is the situation when you move from inside the curve to on the curve, your unemployment goes down. Your unemployment of resources goes down. Okay, guys, remember this. When unemployment of resources goes down, the curve, a lot of students get confused here. They think that when unemployment in the economy falls, this is a positive thing, the curve would shift outwards. No, the curve does not shift outwards due to a fall in unemployment. The curve shifts outwards due to a rise in resources. Rise in resources, right? When your resources increase in size. We'll come to that in the next class. But because the workers over here were unemployed. Unemployment means that the resources already existed, but they were not being utilized. But increase in the size of the resources means that less resources existed, but now you have more resources. So let's say you had 10 workers. Let's say you had 10 workers, but now you have 50 workers. So this is PPC shifting. This is PPC shifting outwards to the right. This is PPC shifting outwards to the right because now you have more resources. It's PPC shifting outwards. But let's say that you had 10 workers, and out of those 10 workers, only one was employed. The other 9 were jobless, right? But now let's say out of the 9, all of the 9 are either employed, or let's say 6 of them are employed. So this situation would represent a point when you had only one worker employed. You were inside the curve, way far away from the PPC boundary. And remember that the further away you are from the PPC boundary, the more unemployed the resources are in the economy, the greater the idle capacity, or the greater the level of inefficiency in the economy, underutilization of resources in the economy. So a movement from this point, so if all of the 9 are employed now, or let's say 6 of them are employed, so if 6 of them are employed, you'll move closer to the curve. If all 9 are employed, you'll move on the curve, right? If 6 are employed, you'll move closer to the curve. If all 9 are employed, you'll move on the curve. So what I'm trying to say to you over here is that it reflects economic growth, it reflects idle capacity being used. And so if the unemployment in the economy goes down, remember that you'll move closer to the PPC curve. Okay, guys, so I'm going to be keeping till here. And this also represents economic growth. So your economy is growing because more utilization of resources are taking place. I'm going to be keeping till here, and we're going to be continuing this in next week. Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Allah Hafiz.